You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davies, hosting as usual, and we're joined today by Reds correspondent Sarah Clapson. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Matt. I'm all right, thank you.
Good. And returning for a second appearance on the podcast is BBC Radio Nottingham football presenter David Jackson. Good morning, David. Are you well?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm in a festive spirit, as you can see.
Yes, for those of you who are listening on iTunes or anywhere else, David's got a magnificently decorated Christmas tree behind him. I mean, this is a football podcast, but I'll let you give a shout out to whoever decorated that. Was that your daughters or your wife?
That's my daughter's. But you'll be pleased to see the amount of red on there, which is very good for this podcast. So, I mean, admittedly, yes, some of the decorations are homemade, rustic.
They're the best ones.
Of course, they're the best ones.
Yeah.
So yes, there's I like it. We like it, and I've even put the lights on, occasional flashing, just so that it'll spark things up. When you've gone 4 games without seeing a goal, anything. To cheer you up.
Yes, well, let's talk about that. I mean, another game without a goal, but a good positive point against Watford. I mean, what did you make of it, David? A step in the right direction?
Yeah, it felt like that. Brian Laws, after the game, when I was talking to him, just said, well, it's baby steps, isn't it? And I think that's probably fair enough. But it did feel a lot better. I think if that game had been, first day of the season, I was talking to Colin Frey about this morning, actually. If that had been first day of the season and you go 0-0 draw against a team just relegated, you'd say, well, that's a decent enough start. I think when it comes off the back of 3 defeats, 3 games without a goal, you are still left wondering, where is a goal going to come from? And those questions, of course, are completely legitimate. I just felt that despite that run of results, they looked a bit more lively. I think perhaps that was down to Joe Worrell. I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but maybe his inclusion helped in that. I thought they looked quite lively at times without ever being much of a threat in the final third, but it's also a clean sheet, and only the third this season. Blackburn and Wickham, I think, must have been the others. So I think it's only a third this season. So a lot of positives to take, but sometimes it's a bit hard to take those when that result comes off the back of 3 defeats, and it's just another game without a goal being scored.
Yeah, I mean, what was the biggest positive for you, Sarah, aside from not conceding a goal and getting a point? What did you take from it?
I think that probably was the positive. They did play pretty well, I thought, Forest. They looked the more likely to get a goal. Although probably, as David said, you kind of thought, I can't really see where one's coming from. They did create some good chances. They got into decent positions. They just didn't really look like scoring. But the biggest positive was that clean sheet. They did, Watford didn't really cause them too many problems. I can't remember Brice Samba having any saves to make, really. He had a few kind of nervy moments, but they were mainly of his own doing. Joe Worrell, I thought, made a huge difference. And he helped Tobias Figueiredo, I think, as well alongside him. He looked a lot better than he has done in recent weeks. I think as a back four, they worked really well with Ryan Yates in front of them. They did a good job of limiting Watford to very little, and you have to take a lot from that. That is really encouraging. And even though they didn't get the goal, I think the fact that, there were a few positives attacking-wise, it's something to build on. They still have that, scoring a goal is the major problem at the minute, but you kind of feel like they're edging towards it a little bit more, and they're getting there. I think there's still a long way to go, but there was definitely more positives than negatives last night.
Did Hewton say how long McKenna's out for, Sarah?
He's hoping to have him back for the weekend. He said it was only a minor problem, so hopefully he'll be back fit for Reading. But I don't know, do you change it after that, after you've kept a clean sheet, when you've had Worrell and Figueiredo do pretty well? It's a difficult one. I'd really like to see Worrell and McKenna. I think they'll be the first choice partnership going forward, because McKenna's been brilliant. Obviously, Worrell's come in, and it was his leadership more than anything, I think, that made a difference last night. He was the loudest voice on the pitch. He was organising, he was encouraging, he was telling people where to go. The number of times I heard him shout "Cafu," I think if I had £1 for every time he did that, I'd probably, I'd be very rich by now, but a little bit more rich. He made a big difference. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't keep his place. But having said that, I mean, you don't know his fitness levels. He was thrown straight back into the into the starting level after being out since September. So whether he's fit enough to start 2 games in a row, I don't know, but it's an interesting one.
It is interesting that because I think it does suddenly give Chris Hewton options, doesn't it? Which is very interesting, because I think before last night you'd have been thinking it'd be great to get Worrell in with McKenna, who's been really good, and Figueiredo, particularly earlier in the season, was sloppy under Sabri Lamouchi, and he's kind of got a bit better. But the last few weeks, I think, well, if you could replace Figueiredo, get Worrell in there, would look a lot more solid. And then it ended up being unfortunate that McKenna's picked up thankfully only a slight knock, but misses out. But I agree with you. I think Worrell's communication, great. I think it helps organise everything. And I think we've been calling out, haven't we, for a bit of that communication out on the pitch, somebody to drive them, somebody to kind of make things happen. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a creative player. It has to be somebody who can go out there, make some noise, get things organised, as you said, like shouting Cafu here, there, telling players where to go, keeping that communication up and that noise up out on the pitch. And if he's doing that, Michael Dawson, who was in the 20 as well, is doing that from the touchline and being there in and around the place as well on a match day, then that's great news. And I think you're right. I think Worrell and McKenna is the partnership ultimately that you'll end up with. But Figueiredo's obviously gone, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to do well here to try and keep my place. Whether it'll be enough, I don't know. But if that performance now means that Chris Hewton can take a little bit more time with Worrell and not rush him back and make him play games where he might not want him to, and there is a lot of games coming up midweeks and so on. If he can rotate it for a bit until Worrell's back 100% fit, then that's really good news.
I mean, I would play, if Worrell's fit, I'd play him and McKenna. But then there's always that risk, isn't there? I mean, this is why he's the manager; he gets paid for it. But if you go and play Worrell and he breaks down, or he's not 100%, he doesn't perform, and then you lose to Reading, you're sort of back to square one, because now they do need to build on this. And of the fixtures coming up, Reading is probably the most inviting, even though they're up there. They did have quite a big wobble themselves, so it's another big game. I wanted to talk about the midfield balance. I had a tweet last night from someone saying that it's 4 wins in 35 games with Yates in the team. If they keep playing Yates, they're in a relegation battle. Basically pinning the entire affair on him, which I thought was very, very harsh. I mean, did you think that midfield looked better with the shape it had, and with just one sitting with Yates, who I thought did a really good job? Did they look a bit more effective as a unit there, David, did you think?
Well, it's interesting because I thought before the game I was expecting Cafu to play deeper as well. I remember we've been told that he's going to be a sort of deeper midfielder than in number 10, although I know Chris Hewton said that he quite fancies the idea of pushing him a bit further forward than he's played before. So to see it the way it was last night, I think was slightly unexpected. Did it look better? Yeah, maybe. I think I didn't really know what to expect from Cafu in that position further forward as well. And I don't know whether ultimately not. They didn't score, so obviously it hasn't made a complete revolutionary difference with him in the side. But I mean, they were making things happen, weren't they? I like Arter in the team. I think when he gets the ball, he goes forwards and looks forwards and looks like he's going to try and make things happen. I agree with you. I like Ryan Yates. I think if somebody's played as much as they have and managers keep picking him, then there's probably a reason. I like his passion out there as well. And it's been a bit unlucky, I think, earlier on in the season that he was getting into the penalty area and getting on the end of crosses and maybe missing some chances. But he was the one that was getting in there. He was the one that was gambling, taking a chance, getting forward, getting into the opposition box and trying to make things happen, which is not necessarily what he's being asked to do as his priority, but he's getting in there and making it happen anyway. So I feel a bit sorry for him as well with some of the stick that he's got, because I think if you speak to his teammates or the manager, they'll talk very, very highly of him. And so I quite liked that. I think it did make things happen a little bit. The problem will always come back to that final third, and I think there is enough creativity in that team. Players like Lolly and Amiobis on the day can be outstanding. Knockaert has got absolutely bags of ability. There should be loads of great balls going into the box. There should be chance after chance after chance. And every opposition manager keeps saying, wow, you look at their team on paper and they look one of the best 3 or 4 teams in this division. And a lot of that's down to that ability at that end of the pitch. And yet when they play, you think, well, where is it then? Where's the end product? And game after game after game with this happening, you kind of think, well, it is Groundhog Day in that final third. We're getting nowhere ultimately.
What do you make of Knockaert? Because Swansea at the weekend. He looks very frustrated, like a player who knows he's better than he's playing, and he's searching for that form. Do you think he's edging towards it at all, Sarah?
Yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head there, that he does seem like he's frustrated out there on the pitch. He knows what he wants to do. Perhaps it just doesn't always come off at the minute. I think he's shown flashes of his ability. And like David said, he's got bags and bags of talent. You can see some of the things he does. He's real quality. I think maybe he's just been a little bit inconsistent so far. We've not kind of seen it a great deal. He's shown it now and again. He's played some nice passes. He's been involved in some nice moves, but he's not really taken a game yet by the scruff of the neck and tried to drive something or create something. I think it's coming. I think it's just not. It's not all on him. It's just not clicked as a unit, I think, for Forest yet going forward. And I think you've got players as well as Knockaert, players like Joe Lolly, who haven't been at top form yet. And Amiobis as well, I think you can include in that. Harry Arter last night, he had a few chances. He didn't quite get it right. Players that just aren't performing like we know they can. And when you kind of put all of that into the mix, to then try and make that a cohesive attacking unit, it's difficult. And then you've got someone like Lowell Taylor up there a lot of the time without much support. It's difficult for him. He got maybe one or two chances, I think, last night, but not a lot. And he works so hard, but just not a lot for him to live off.
It's difficult, isn't it, when you've got those creative players? You want those creative players to just kind of have freedom and be able to relax, to express themselves. But when they're in a team that's struggling, the pressure sort of becomes on their shoulders, and you want to take that weight off their shoulders for them to be able to just relax, enjoy themselves, express themselves, and so on. But it's really hard for them to do, because I mean, there was the Knockaert chance, wasn't there, when he cut in from the right and fired the shot towards the bottom corner against Swansea, wasn't it? The keeper kind of just stuck his foot out and made the save, and you thought, if that had gone in, I wonder, because after that he just looked like, what do I have to do? And I just wonder whether there is that bit of expectation on him, bit of pressure on him, and probably putting it on himself as well, because he knows he's torn this division apart in the past, and now he's in a team that just aren't sort of getting anywhere in that final third, and he so wants to make it happen himself, and it just isn't quite happening yet in that sense. They're not scoring goals.
I think confidence is a massive factor as well, and it becomes a bit of a monkey on their back a little bit. You're thinking about it too much because you've gone so many games without getting that goal, and because everybody's talking about you not creating a lot of chances, you're trying too hard sometimes. You're thinking about it too much rather than doing things naturally and it just happening. There's too much kind of going on up here and just not doing it as you normally would, and the longer it goes on, the difficult it becomes to break that cycle.
There was a very random bit in the game which sort of summed it up. Where you might have been writing, Sarah, because it was like when Amiobis came on and produced perhaps the single worst piece of individual play I've ever seen.
Yeah,
when he went for a cross and put it out for, was it a goal kick? It was a cross that went straight. It was really weird. Yeah. But I think that sums up players perhaps not in the right place.
It was so weird that he even stopped and stared at it for a few. I don't think he could quite believe what had just happened. He did everything about his body going into it and everything. It just like, what's happened there? It was really odd, wasn't it?
It was. Really I thought the offside flag must have gone up. I thought it's got to be offside, and he's wasting a bit of time. But it was a funny aside, and it made me laugh anyway because it was that bad.
But when things are going badly, those things seem highlighted, don't they? I think probably things like that do happen even for teams at the top end of the table. But when you're losing, when you're unable to score, every moment in that final third becomes heightened. And like you said, Sarah, that's where the pressure sort of mounts, because you sort of think, oh no, that's gone wrong. But something like that could happen any time, and you can have delivered 10 perfect balls into the box before that, and then you can just scuff one and it go wrong. But when it's just not happening, and something like that then happens, it just drags the mood down, doesn't it? You just think, it just feels like nothing's going right. And you end up with a few moments of like misplaced passes that just suddenly go out of play, and you think it just sort of drags everyone down, because it seems to epitomise what's going on and the sort of general feeling of frustration around the place.
True. I mean, you talk about perfect crosses. I think that was the one thing that was lacking, really, because more than recent games, they got in behind. I think Ribeiro, Christie, Lolly, Knockaert maybe, all got in behind in good positions. And the final ball was sorely lacking, I suppose. Is that a confidence thing, do you think? Something, or is it just a case that sometimes when you're playing well, you get an extra man in the box and it falls for them? At least there's positives that they were getting in behind them, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, that's why I think we're encouraged, because it was a step further forward than they have been perhaps at other times in the last few weeks. But yeah, ultimately, you know, the balls into the box haven't really been good enough. Sort of just flashed in across, and you think, well, okay, you know, it doesn't. There's never been a ball in the box where you'd say there's a real sort of gilt-edged chance for the strikers, and so that. To quote Brian Laws again, it's, you know, it's those baby steps, isn't it? You're able to get in behind them, so it feels like, okay, well, we're taking a step further forward there. We're getting in behind. Now the next step, you know, let's get the next step. Let's start getting some dangerous balls into the box and let's start making things happen. Because I think Lyle Taylor works so hard, you know, and he's getting back in defence, making slide tackles, you know, like he did last night. He got back into his penalty area, making an important tackle to prevent a cross into the box. He's working so hard, and you can see what it means to him. He's trying to make things happen. He's desperate to get goals, and also just desperate to see the team win. As I say, the fact that he's back there helping out the defence last night showed everything for me about him. But there's got to be the chances for him. You know, you can't say that he's missed chances. Lewis Grabban got a fair few early on in the season and missed them, of course, but don't really feel like Taylor's had the services yet.
I was just going to expand on Cafu. We really barely touched on him there. I mean, he's come out of, you know, nowhere in a sense, apart from playing that 15-minute cameo at Middlesbrough. What did you make of him, Sarah? Is he another kind of Guerrero who's had one good game and not done much since, or do we think there could be a player there?
Yeah. I mean, you hate to judge someone on one game, really, but I thought he did really well last night. I was really impressed with him. He was positive, he was lively, he wanted to get on the ball, he wanted to make things happen. He was always looking to get involved, and he added a bit more dynamism, I think, which is something that had been lacking. I think, like David said, we were told that he was going to be more of a defensive midfielder. Then when you see him kind of pushing forward a bit, it was kind of like, oh, right, okay. Joe Worrell pretty much summed it up afterwards when he said, I think he's more of an 8.5 than an 8 or a 10 or whatever other position. But he did pretty well, I think. And it's good to have options like that. He brings something different. And that's what you need. If you're Chris Hewton, and if he's not starting, even if you're looking at him on the bench and thinking, well, he can come on and try and make something happen if you need it to. And it's good to have different options like that.
I do think that number 10 is a bit of an issue for Forest, though, don't you? I mean, I'm not sure. I think we'd all kind of pinned hopes on Freeman, Luke Freeman, coming in the summer. I know he's got a bit of an injury at the moment, but we've not seen much from him when he's played. I think you could, if you've got a really good number 10 in that role, you can base things around him. You can bring your wingers in and get balls into your striker. But without that happening properly, that's one of the reasons I think that probably Forest not scoring goals, and they really need to sort that out. Because I agree, I think he did a lot of good things. Would you, if you're actually looking at challenging at the top end of the table, is he the man you want in a number 10, Cafu? I'd probably say no. So you need something a bit better, a bit more creative, something like Luke Freeman in his pomp, could do that. And at the moment, I'm struggling to see quite where who's going to do that role. Could Joe Lolly do it? Maybe, you could do that. Could you even try Knockaert in there? I don't know. I would probably prefer him out wide. But, there's something's got to happen for me in that role. If you're going to play with a number 10, it's such an important position and so pivotal in the team and in terms of everything you do when you're going forward. You've got to get a good one. As you know, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the days of Nigel Clough, who wore 9, but basically was a number 10. And he made things happen. He would drop deep, get the balls through for other players to run onto. It can be such an important position. It can win you matches time after time. And I don't feel at the moment we've got the number 10 position right at all.
I don't think they even had one last night, really, did they? I mean, I saw it as 4-1-4-1 with the very isolated Taylor and Cafu meant to be the man who got nearest to him. And I guess you could play that way, but I don't think that's a sustainable long-term formula if you're looking to win games. That's a way not to get beat in these games against the good sides. I wanted to ask about the ref because we haven't touched on him yet. I mean, I don't like to rag on refs and dunk on them, but he was bad, especially with the Chalabar thing. I mean, is there any mitigation, Sarah, at all? Could you see what the ref was thinking?
No. No. They should have. I think there was 3 challenges where he should have been booked. He got booked for 1, and then there's the Arta one straight afterwards, and that was a horrible challenge. And nothing happened. He did, yeah.
Got books.
Well, yeah. Other than that, I thought he should have gone for that. I thought the ref was bad. I don't think he was bad that it had an effect on the game. He made some really odd decisions against Forest, particularly. I think there was quite a few times where he thought, don't really get what you're doing there. But I don't think it had an overall impact on the final scoreline.
You agree?
There is no excuse, though. I mean,
No.
it could well have gone for the first challenge, to be honest. You know, he slid in outrageously late, studs are showing, looked dangerous to me. So you go, well, that many refs would have given that as a red in the first place. He decided to give a yellow. If you're giving a yellow for that, and he's still sliding around the place causing injury, I mean, it's a no-brainer to send the guy off. I think even he was looking around. It got that, you know, sometimes you're watching a game and you think, he's going to get sent off soon, whether it's been booked yet or not. And he had that kind of look about him. He was flying in everywhere. And then when he gets booked for the first one, you think, well, he's not going to last. And then there's, like you said, there's another one. And like you say, by that point, I think there was only 5 or 6 minutes left anyway, I think, by the time the second one was around. But I think if it had been somebody else, he would have booked him. And I just think it was that thing of, it's going to be a red card. So he didn't do it. And if that's the case, then that's madness.
Chris Hewton's normally the most placid man, isn't he? But to hear him say afterwards, no, he should have gone. I can't understand why that was a red card. I think that probably tells you a lot.
He tried to be diplomatic again, didn't he?
He
He's always diplomatic, but he said, you don't like to see players sent off, but he should have been.
Yeah.
And just I can't defend that. How can you? It's just no question. He just should have gone. I wonder what it would have been like with fans in. You know, like because of the noise that would have been there after the first challenge. I wonder if that might have led to a sending off in the first one, or whether it would have even led to a sending off after the second challenge. I do wonder about that. And I've heard managers saying that the reintroduction of fans might start influencing referees more in one way, especially as it's going to be a completely one-sided crowd, as we're starting to see around the country now. And I just wonder, I'm not saying it would or wouldn't, and referees will always say it wouldn't make a difference. But I do wonder if you've got best part of 30,000 fans going mad after a dangerous challenge on the touchline, is a referee more inclined to give a red card than a yellow in there? I mean, it's ifs, buts and maybes, but...
Yeah, I mean, I thought the one where he slid on Cafu was very similar to the one that Yanu got sent off for at Luton in the area of the pitch and the way he went about the tackle. And it's just the lack of consistency. But I don't think refs have been as bad this season. I think that was an instance where he was just terrible. You mentioned crowds, David. Obviously, Forest go to Reading on Saturday, and Reading's not exactly the most daunting place to go, having been there a few times, but they will have a crowd. I mean, does that make a difference, having a few thousand quiet Reading fans sat there or not?
I don't know. I think it probably makes more of a difference in the lower leagues. I think, Mansfield last night went to Cambridge where they had 2,000 fans. And I watched the highlights this morning to see what it was like. And okay, they're a bit distanced apart. You could tell they're a bit distanced apart. But there's 2,000 fans watching Cambridge. That's not particularly unusual. So the level of noise around the place, even though they were wearing masks, it just all four sides had got supporters in, and they were all supporting the home team. So that has to be seen as an advantage for Cambridge. Not financially, because they had to have so many stewards that actually they made a loss on the night. It actually cost them money. But in terms of having supporters around as an advantage on the pitch, surely that should make a difference. I mean, Mansfield went there and won. But, in a long term, generally speaking, that should make a difference, I think. When you're looking at championship grounds, when you're looking at going to a stadium that holds between 20 and 30,000, and you put 2,000 in there, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that same feel, does it? They're going to be. I don't even know if they're going to open, how they'll do it whether they'll open all the stands. I don't know if we know that yet. If they're going to open all the stands, how far apart they're going to be. It's just it's not going to have that same feeling, and also it can be detrimental. Reading have. Yes, they've recovered a little bit, but they had that little run of 4 straight defeats. If Forest went there, this is a massive if, I know at the moment, but bear with the story. If Forest go there and score early, I know, just bear with it. If Forest went there and scored early, imagine the only fans in the stadium now are frustrated fans, annoyed with their team because they've just conceded a goal to a team who haven't been able to score in their previous 4, and they start to sense things going wrong. So that's not going to be great, is it? A largely quiet ground where you've got 2,000 frustrated, annoyed home fans, smattered around the stadium. So then it's very much not an advantage. And I'm not sure in the bigger grounds whether having 2,000 socially distant supporters really creates enough of an atmosphere for it to make much of a difference. In fact, really, it probably means that the manager's more likely to hear the stick that's being hurled at them from behind. And probably more likely to make the players hear the stick that's hurled at them from behind. You can't get songs going. You can't get any of that actually generates the actual normal match day atmosphere. So is it an advantage for Reading and then Norwich next week? I'm not sure really.
There's one thing that annoys me about Reading is their team. This is a very journalistic aside. Their team sheets, they put the Reading subs down as an extra, Reading fans as an extra sub, and I think that's really pathetic.
There's quite a lot that annoys me about Reading. If you've got time. I mean, there was one thing that really annoyed me about Reading years ago, which was Dave Kitson was playing for them, and I remember they'd not that long after been promoted, and he said that for big clubs like them in the Premier League, the FA Cup wasn't quite so much of a priority. And I thought, I'm not having that. Like, if you're a top Premier League team and you've got Champions League matches to worry about and you're playing 60 games a season, I'm passionate about the FA Cup, but I can sort of understand where your priorities start to change because you're trying to win the Premier League and keep your players fit and you're trying to stay in the Champions League and so on. So I understand how it falls down the pecking order a little bit. But if you're Reading, then I'm sorry, the FA Cup is a big priority. And also, don't get me started on being sponsored by Waitrose as they were. So it just doesn't. If you're sponsored by Asda, then that's a football club. Waitrose should be saved for the local polo team.
Absolutely. Sarah, well then let's looking at the game itself and not slagging off the opposition.
Are you going to edit that bit out? Are you going to edit that bit out to not offend all the Waitrose shoppers?
You might get sponsored by them.
We're after a sponsor if anyone's watching. Hello, Waitrose, or Asda, or Lidl. Other supermarkets are available. So, Sarah, back to football. Would you make any changes to the team depending on this?
No, I don't think I would really. I think
Apart from McKenna, maybe.
Yeah, apart from McKenna, that would probably be the only one. I think you need a bit of consistency in your team selection. I still think Chris Hewton hasn't quite settled on his best team and his best formation yet. I get that it's good to have options and it's good to mix things up a little bit and have. I know everybody always talks about this plan B and plan C and plan D and everything, but I think sometimes you need that consistency. You need to kind of build those relationships on the pitch, and they played pretty well. I don't think there is any need to change it. And who would you change it for? Other than maybe bring Amiobis in, because I thought Joe Lolly perhaps didn't have the best of games. Other than that, I don't think there's too much really that you think, yeah, I'd change that.
What about you, David? I actually thought Lolly was decent second half, and Knockout was good first half, and they kind of swapped performance levels. But would you make any changes?
Lolly didn't do a lot first half, did he? He didn't quite look right. He seemed to pick it up, like you say, second half. But yeah, first half, I don't know. Would he change things? I mean, he's sort of been rotating the wide players a bit, hasn't he? I think you can only go on. And it's kind of what the manager's got available and how he feels like they're doing in training. But would I change that? I don't know. Do they need a bit of a run, or do they need kind of mixing up? I don't know. It just seems whatever they try at the moment, it doesn't make any difference, does it? So I'm not sure. Do they just need a bit of a break? You know, a bit of a break in front of goal and something to happen for something to spark. I think we saw at the end of last season that players like Lolly and Amiobis were being too relied on, and they started getting quite tired. I think you've got a lot of games coming up, so I sort of quite like the idea of rotating them and certainly at the moment kind of, you know, mixing them around. But I just think at the moment it almost doesn't matter. They're all capable and they're all inconsistent. So you just play who you want to play, and at some point something hopefully will click. And that word hope, it's interesting. I heard Chris Hewton using that word again last night. You know, we hope it'll turn around, and I think he kind of means he believes it will turn around. He just hopes it'll be soon. I think he's confident he'll be able to turn it round. It's just kind of how soon it'll turn round. And maybe it just needs one of those for something to happen. I just like to see Joe Lolly pick it up and run at the defence from 40 yards out, take them on and have a smash at goal, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. And I do wonder, to go back to the fans again, I think that's a factor. People like this, people like Joe Lolly are entertainers. You know, that they make their living by being out on the pitch and getting a rise from the fans by literally, you know, by getting the ball setting off and the players get up out of their seats. They're entertainers. And without anyone to entertain, I do think it's more difficult. And I know that people will be screaming at me now saying it's the same for everybody, and, you know, the money should be motivation enough and blah, blah, blah. I get that. But just at that moment that you've got the ball on a pitch and there are fans there to give you that extra lift and go, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to drop the shoulder. I'm going to go. I think it does make a difference. I think it just, regardless of whether it should or shouldn't, I think it just does make a difference to those sorts of players. But I'd just like to see at some point Joe Lolly try that, and again, and for it to happen, and then who knows? Maybe it'll kick off in the right direction then. Maybe.
I'd like to see Alex Mighton get a bit more time as well. I think.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Because he was on the bench last night, wasn't he? And you know, as a young lad who's got a good bit of pace, and, you know, was given a long contract in the summer. It'd be nice to see. And it's interesting, when I was talking to Chris Hewton about the youth policy a few weeks back and asking about whether ideally he'd like to have a few more young players around, because he brought Will Swan in to travel, and I said, do you ideally want to start getting to a position where you've got more young players around? And he said, well, they've got to be good enough, and, you know, you've got to think about the size of your squad. And I think what he meant by that is he's got a lot of senior players to try and keep happy as well. And with them all coming back to fitness, he's got a lot to manage. And if you're wanting to bring in young players to develop and give time to, as soon as you give Alex Mighton 20 minutes, and this shouldn't put you off necessarily, but you give Alex Mighton 20 minutes, then there's another senior player on the bench who's annoyed that he didn't get on. And they're just, I mean, that's tough, isn't it? But it's situations that he has also got to try and manage in a position where he's trying to keep everybody happy, not a squad that he's built, of course, before he can start to make the changes that he might want to personnel to actually spark things further in January, if he can.
Yeah, I'd like to see Mighton come on. I thought that game was crying out for Mighton late in the game. I think one concern, I suppose concern is the right word. I think Hewton is very conservative with substitutions, especially when you've got five. I thought he was riding his luck a little bit late in the game there with a few tired-looking legs, I thought, personally. But there you go. If anyone disagrees, do shout up. But that was how I saw it. I wanted to finish looking big picture, because we on Monday we did a podcast with a couple of fans, and I asked them where they'd like the club to be realistically in 12 months' time in 2021. And I guess it's more pertinent off the back of the piece that Danny Taylor did this week, which put a spotlight on the club and the way it's run. I mean, David, what would you like to see the state of Nottingham Forest to be in 12 months' time, realistically? I don't mean top of the Premier League, that's not going to happen. But you know what I mean. You know what I'm angling for, about what kind of club the fans were provided with.
I think in 12 months, I think it'd be nice to see the same manager in charge for a start, because I think if Chris Hewton, even if he has a difficult season this year, I'd like to see him given a couple of transfer windows at least to start getting a squad that he wants. So I'd like to see that. I I'd like to see Forest have scored a few goals by then. That'd be nice. And, you know, that next season there is improvement on the pitch year on year. Of course, I'd also like to see the development of some more of the younger players in and around the squad, because that's just always exciting. And that's something Forest have done so well for so many years. Off the pitch, I think it'd be nice to start hearing from the people in charge of the club, because, you know, since they took over, Evangelos Marinakis, the owner, has done an interview, which he did with Richard Conway of the BBC, and didn't do any other interviews when he took over. He's done one with us. Charlie Slater did it for East Millers today when he went over to Greece for a pre-season friendly. Forest were playing against Olympiacos, so he did one interview there. But in terms of the board and the people in charge at Forest, yes, we've spoken to Johnny Owen a couple of times, but he's on the board, but not running the club, if you like. That's down to Nicholas Randall and Yanis Vrenchos. And we haven't heard from them. And we have asked several times over the last few years, because there's a lot of questions that we'd like to know the answers to. So it'd be nice to have that level of communication with supporters, because personally, I don't think that just releasing an occasional statement is enough. I think that they should be held accountable. All football club owners, I think, should be held accountable. Yes, they're not elected representatives like MPs or councillors, but for me, they are in charge of a football club which is, in essence, community owned, because it's owned by the football fans in a sort of more spiritual sense. And I think, therefore, they should be putting themselves out there to say, I'll be accountable and I'll do these interviews. Now, Nigel Doughty used to just do one a year and then leave it to the chief executive, Mark Arthur, to do other interviews. Fawaz Al-Asawi did interviews, of course, as well. And I think that if there was that openness, that accountability, where you could then get clarification on questions, you know, you could ask the questions, what is the transfer policy? What is the deal with players moving between Olympiacos and Forest, and who's the priority in that sort of situation? What is happening with the development of the ground? All these questions, which you would love to be able to sit down with the chief executive or the chairman and ask these questions and get answers to them. So it would be great if the club could become more accountable and more open to speaking to the press like yourselves, and to us and the local media, who we aren't out to get them. We'd just like to be able to put points to them and ask them questions and find out what's going on behalf of the fans, and because I think it would be the right thing for them to do. So off the pitch, I'd like to see that happening. And then, yeah, hopefully if that happens, there will be supporters who've got a bit more of a sense of affiliation with the owners, feel like they know a bit more what's going on, rather than it being a bit of a mystery. And then when articles like Danny Taylor's comes out, then it starts to create worries, and understandably. So I think the club could do with doing that, and I think they could do with answering a lot of questions around that. And yeah, like I said, on the pitch, let's, you know, just better. You know, if there's an improvement and you can start to see some steady progress, then that'd be great. But then, you know, we've been asking for that for 20 years. So,
Sarah, I guess you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think pretty much word for word, I'd agree with what David said. Particularly about keeping the manager. I think that's something you'd really like to see. Forest have gone through so many managers over the last few years. They've tried so many different things. Chris Hewton is a really good manager. He's got great experience. He knows what he's doing. He knows the division. If you give him time, I'm convinced that he'll get Forest where they want to be, or at least challenging. You need stability. I think it's shown successful clubs have that stability. They have that kind of solid foundation. And sooner or later, you've got to give somebody a chance. And I think that Chris Hewton is probably the best man at the minute to try and do that. And also agree with David about it'd be great to speak to any of the club hierarchy, like David has. We've asked and not been able to get anywhere. And that's Forest's choice, and they're entitled to that. And I can kind of understand a little bit why they might be reluctant to do things like that, because sometimes it's seen as maybe, well, you know, we're trying to do it a certain way. And, you know, you look at when Fawaz was in charge and he was on Twitter every 5 minutes and giving interviews that perhaps didn't always convey the club in the best light. And sometimes it is better to be a bit quieter and kind of just get on with it. But then when you have articles like Danny Taylor's article and you know, fans start talking and worrying a little bit, then I think that is the time when perhaps you do need to hear from people just to put their point of view across.
I would agree. And the only thing I'd add is I would like the signings figure to be under 80 by this time in a month. Let's hope there's still only signed 70 odd players in the last 4 years, because I think that would be nice to see a bit more of a considered policy there. Right, we shall leave it there and we'll be back on Monday. But thanks very much to Sarah and David for joining me. I appreciate you both giving me your time on a very chilly, what day is it? Thursday morning. So I'm very grateful for that. And we shall see everyone soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.